Well, the Skinwalker and Stardust Ranches are two properties that have intrigued us for many years, with reports of UFOs, cryptid beasts, portals, missing time, cattle mutilations, even doppelgangers, men and women in black, orbs, strange beams of light, mysterious beings, and I could go on. The Meadow Project is a book which details another area of the United States which is not as commonly known, but produces activity to rival those two famous ranches. It's located in America's Southland, a remote site known among select researchers simply as the Meadow, and it's the location of many astounding events. Trey Hudson, who has been researching all the events going on at the Meadow, probably knows as much about that particular spot on the map as anyone. He's got a bachelor's degree in psychology and he's been researching the Meadow now for several years, and he's joining us now. Hi, Trey, how are you?
Oh, great, great. Thank you for having me. It's a real honor.
No, it's a pleasure. Trey, just firstly, how did you hear about the Meadow?
Well, it's one of those weird situations in life that you just sort of fall into, you stumble into. Back many years ago, I was very interested in geocaching and had placed a geocache in, the more or less general locale of where we're researching now. And in some of the reviews of people that would go and look for this geocache, I found a particular narrative where some geocachers had encountered some locals, and they started relaying this story of a county road in an area that I call the Blackwater Nature Preserve, and I've changed the identities of some of these locations to keep the locale inviolate and pristine. And I started researching it, and the more I looked into it, and the more I researched it, I started finding this pattern of high strangeness. And I kind of my background is kind of as more of a paranormal investigator,
Mm-hmm.
ghost and poltergeist, things like that. So what I started discovering during my research is when you take, let's say, like a map overlay, and you start mapping out ghost sightings or ghost stories, typical paranormal haunted house stuff. And then you start plotting, take another overlay, start plotting out Bigfoot sightings and cryptid sightings. Then you have an additional overlay where you have UFO sightings and various encounters, CE1, to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And you lay all these overlays together and you start seeing a correlation. You start seeing a geographical link. Something else that's very interesting I found is if you take some of the research that David Paulides has been doing, and you take these epicenters of strange missing persons reports, and sometimes these additionally correlate to these areas of high strangeness, which happens to be the case with this location. So the more I started looking in, the more intrigued I became, and actually to this general locale and kind of check it out. And we just happened to stumble into something absolutely amazing, unworldly, breathtaking. And if I wasn't there, I would say unbelievable.
Wow. So, did you then decide to check out the history of that area?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I started really digging into the history of the area. My research methodology is I go from macro to micro. I looked at, you know, multiple states, areas that might cross state lines of high strangeness. And then I focused into the various counties that this particular nature preserve traverses. And then I started focusing on the actual nature preserve itself. The more I dug into it and the deeper I got and the tighter I focused, my microscope, I started seeing just a really rich history of a high strangeness going back, many years.
Okay. So, at what point did you decide that it was worth ongoing research?
Well, what kind of piqued our interest is back in 2015, we started just kind of checking the area out. And, it started off as a kind of a low key camping trip. It's a remote area, so we have to bring our own gear and all of the logistics we have to manage for ourselves. And during this particular trip, we went to a location that was mentioned in some of the MUFON reports for this particular region. and we experienced things like strange flashes of light deep into the forest. Now that's kind of interesting because now it's starting to come out from cryptid researchers, and one of them is the legendary Bobo Fay. He was mentioning in a documentary I saw not too long ago of seeing flashes in the forest, flashes of light, like a flash bulb would go off. And these are the same experiences we were having. I personally experienced a little bit of distortion, a little bit of things seemed kind of odd as we were
Hmm.
driving down this road, almost like a what cinematographers call a dolly zoom shot. You know, everything just sort of compressed down and focused in my field of vision. Uh, and during that trip, we also had a wispy, shadowy like figure run across the road. Now, this area is well known for cryptid sightings. It's, you know, it's not unusual.
Hmm.
Yeah, as odd as that sounds, you know, cryptid sightings not being unusual, which are very unusual in their very nature, but it's reported in this area. We had, while we were there, uh, we saw strange orbs of light, uh, you know, throughout the area. And, you know, it just became very, very intriguing back in 2015. So you start looking at these things happening on one particular trip. And, you know, anybody that even has a remote, tiny interest in this type of stuff said, yeah, I'm going to go back. Absolutely.
Okay. Do you think that the Meadow is comparable in that type of activity to both Skinwalker and Stardust?
You know, came to that conclusion later on. I've always, you know, been interested in the whole Skinwalker Ranch phenomena. You know, it's very well recorded. You know, Robert Bigelow had his you know, National Institute for Discovery Science do their work there. And as we researched this area, and to give you an idea of how active we were there as recently as last weekend. So this is an ongoing project since, you know, in earnest since 2016. I started looking at a catalog of all the experiences that we had encountered. And once I started looking at those in totality, I'm like, you know, this area is experiencing or is manifesting every single thing that the legendary Skinwalker Ranch has manifested. And, you know, we're having the same experiences. We're having, you know, very, you know, very intense situations.
Hmm.
And it's comparable, except that, you know, obviously we're not as well funded as NIDS. You know, we don't
Yeah,
have Robert
yeah,
Bigelow backing us, but, you know, I think we've done a pretty good way of documenting what's going on there. And we have some pretty exciting things I think we're going to try into the future, you know, once we are able to acquire a few other specialized pieces of equipment. So I'm really excited where this is taking us.
yeah. You talked about geocaching earlier, but what about over a wide range, a wide area, say the entire United States? Is the Meadow, um, do you believe there's some way it's connected to Skinwalker and Stardust? Is there something that's connecting these areas that is causing these anomalies?
Who knows? You start looking at different areas around the world. You know, you mentioned Stardust Ranch. You know, we were discussing it just a little bit before the broadcast. You have Skinwalker Ranch. You have Mesa Verde. You have Taos, New Mexico. You know, over in, you know, in the UK, you have Stonehenge. You have Glastonbury. You have all of these sites, and there's something special about these areas. Some people have theorized that maybe the veil between dimensions is a little bit thinner here. Maybe there's an anomalous geomagnetic forces that makes things run a little bit differently. Maybe time's a little bit differently there. Uh, I don't know the answer, and that's
Hmm.
part of the fun is not knowing the answer and, you
Yep.
know, continuing to discuss this with people and research it.
Okay. What about the area? Did it have, or has it still got an indigenous population there? And if it has, have you managed to speak to those people about that area?
Unfortunately, many years ago in the United States, there was a horrible event called the Trail of Tears.
Hmm.
And many of the indigenous personnel in this area, you know, in the America Southland, were rounded up and force marched to the west. So there's not really a very large indigenous population right in this area. Now, you know, you go back and start researching it, there's all kinds of stories of various paranormal encounters, paranormal events, with the Cherokee and some of the other tribes. And I talk about that, touch on that just a little bit in the book. But there's a rich history of uh, evil entities.
Hmm.
There's one called the Spearfinger, which was a evil witch that would eat people's souls. There's
Right.
a history of wild men or hairy men, which were guardians of the forest. So this isn't anything new. It's not like I'm
No.
just now discovering this stuff.
Yep.
I'm just more or less piggybacking on the stories and the rich history of others.
Yeah. I spoke with researcher Chuck Zukowski last year. He had a program on Travel Channel called Alien Highway,
Mhm.
and one episode they dedicated to Skinwalker Ranch, but he found it very difficult to get anything out of the Indigenous population that was there.
Yeah.
They wouldn't speak about it.
Yeah. For a lot of a lot of these indigenous cultures, that type of discussion is taboo. They fear that if you discuss it, that might cause some of the bad phenomena to manifest. And of
Yeah.
course, skinwalkers are, if you read the history of what a skinwalker can actually do, it's rather horrifying. So one should not tempt fate, and that's perhaps why they're very closed mouth up there in the United County area in
Right.
Utah.
Right. I mean, up to this stage of the interview, people are probably wondering, well, where is this place? But you've decided to keep it a secret. Why did you decide that?
That was, and I will apologize to your listeners, and I'll apologize to the readers of the book. That's a decision that was not made lightly. Uh, I looked at areas of high strangeness that have been publicized, over the several decades, and almost to a place. Once the specific location is publicized, not only does it attract the attention of serious researchers, which is laudable, but it also attracts the attention of people that are thrill seekers,
Hmm.
people that are not serious researchers, people that would not respect the site, in the area and respect its uniqueness. I had a rather unfortunate, sad event that happened to me several years ago. I was invited to go up and research an area in the Uwharrie National Forest with a pretty well-known Sasquatch investigator. And there's an area in the forest called Yates Place Campground, which has been featured on several, Bigfoot shows and all of that. We arrived Friday night, and the campsite was, more or less, deserted. We pretty much had it to ourselves. And by the time we woke up Saturday morning, there were like 50 additional tents
Wow.
and campers and, caravans and all. And when you would go out and you didn't know if it was somebody else, researching, or if it was somebody just running around in the woods making noise to disrupt your research. Soul searching, I decided to try to keep this area inviolate. Try to keep it as pristine as possible. Now, there are a few select researchers I will share the area with. It's not my area.
Hmm.
It's really the world's area. But one thing I do require them to do, and I just recently had some new researchers come out with me last Friday and Saturday, is they sign a non-disclosure agreement. Part of that non-disclosure agreement says simply, everything you experience here, you are more than welcome to share. The only thing you cannot share is the location,
Right.
because we want to try to keep it pristine.
Okay. Okay. We spoke off air before we came on, and I met a young man recently who just started working at a coffee shop I frequent several times a week, and he was looking at an interview I did with John Edmonds at Stardust, and he said, man, he said, my dad tells me about the stories about where we grew up, um, and he was basically talking about all the stuff that you've reported on that happens in this area. And then I asked him where was he from, and he told me the location. So we've kind of put two and two together, and there's a probably good chance of what he was talking about
Yeah,
was this area.
right. And all that does is it just more or less validates, what my research has shown, my research in old records and things like that. And it also validates what we're experiencing. Uh, it's just really an interesting area, and I don't know why it hasn't been looked at, more in depth than it has. Uh, But I'm just happy that, we do have people, out there looking at it. And I'm, quite frankly, a little selfish. I'm happy it's my team.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm happy I was able to take my field notes, over the several years and put them into some sort of readable narrative so
Yep.
everybody could share on this adventure.
Yep. All right. Well, I guess the one thing our viewers are waiting for is what some of the things that have been going on there. So, what would be the most amazing event that's taken place while you've researched it?
The most amazing event, and I'm going to pull out some of my field notes here so I don't miss anything, happened in February of 2017. Uh, we decided to investigate this remote mountain meadow as we had for the past several years. We had deployed two teams down into the meadow, and they were equipped with a piece of equipment called a FLIR, F-L-I-R. It's
Hmm.
a thermal scope, a monocular you can hold up to your eye. And what it does is it measures heat, heat signatures. It's not night vision. It measures heat. So we had a team down in the meadow with FLIR units, two teams. We also had a team walking along an adjacent ridge on a well-known backpacking trail or hiking trail called the Opossum Trot Trail.
Yep.
And the team that was up on top of the ridge, they noticed three upright figures about the size of a human being on their FLIR units. Now, something that we do to ensure not only safety but operational, an operational tempo is all of our teams have radio communications, not only with each other, but with a radio base control station back at base camp. We always have somebody monitoring the net, controlling radio traffic, so we know where everybody is. So the first thing we did, okay, every team give their location. Nobody had reported moving from their assigned location, and they validated that. No, we're where, we were told to be. We have not moved. No teams were in the area where the one mobile team had sighted these three figures. The three figures would mold into one figure and then into three, these heat signatures. And slowly they dissipated. So
Hmm.
that was rather odd. So that team dropped down off of the ridge into the meadow and started moving towards our other two field teams. Well, during this time, one of the field teams started noticing a box or a cube, a structure. It was about 10 meters by 6 meters by 6 meters, almost like a cube or a box forming on their FLIR site or their FLIR scope at the edge of the meadow. And before they could hit record on this monocular, unfortunately, when you record continuously, it eats up battery life. So you
Right.
don't, run record all the time. By the time they were able to hit record, it started dissipating. And you could see a very faint outline of where these objects were. And they radioed myself, and I was the operational commander or team chief during that particular uh, investigation. And we got together, discussed what they had seen, and we decided we would try to vector a team into this area where this cube or box was. This was in February in the mountains, so there's no vegetation. All the vegetation has
Yep.
died off during the winter. So this team approaches this area where this cube was. And as the team approaches it, the gentleman operating his high-end FLIR unit says, "Did they just disappear?" And this team disappears off of the out of sight on this FLIR unit. Now you can't fool a FLIR unit; it
No.
measures heat.
Hmm.
It's winter time; everything is cold. Humans put off a lot of heat. This team disappeared off the scope,
Wow.
and yeah, and it was so remarkable that the operator actually commented, "Did they just disappear?" A few moments after this, another operator adjacent to him, she turned her FLIR unit to the right and says, "Who or what is that?" And there was another heat signature watching us and watching these teams from a small copse of trees about 40 meters distance. Once
Okay.
again, this was not any part of our team. We had a strict accountability for our entire team. The team that had approached the anomaly, when they went into the anomaly, they moved in fairly easily. They weren't encumbered by any brambles or briars or anything like that. They remarked that the area was very dark, unnaturally dark, almost like a black curtain had been dropped, over this
Yep.
locale, very dense. Uh, and when they decided to move back out of the area, upon their exit, they started encountering briars and brambles and
Hmm.
other encumbrances that weren't there when they went in. So it's almost like that locale was changed in some way. They stepped into
Yeah.
something else.
Yep.
So, we thought, well, that's got to be the apex of the evening. That's, that is, we have this on video. This has never been filmed that I know of before. And we all gathered back together in a location and we're discussing among ourselves, what should we do? Should we continue to investigate? We've had, strange entities, that we've seen. We've had, and I'm just going to use the word portal because that's just a convenient label. But these boxes are portals. What do we
Hmm.
do? And I just put my foot down and I said, we need to go back. We need to do a video after action review to document all of this while it's still fresh in our minds. And about that time, our base camp operator radioed me and said, Trey, there's someone here that wants to see you. I'm like, yeah, I'm right here. What do you need? And he goes, no, not me, somebody else.
Hmm.
Okay, well, that makes really no sense. I don't know who else would want to see me. I said, well, we're discussing, what we need to do next. And he goes, no, no, this person's really insistent. And I think you need to come back to base camp immediately. And this was about a half a mile hike back to base camp. So we decided to gather up all of our gear, go back, see whatever this mysterious, visitor was, and do our after action review. So when we hiked back, I noticed when I walked into camp there with my base camp operator, Glenn, was a woman in the
Yep.
middle of the forest at 22:30 hours at night, 10:30 at night, in the wintertime, in the middle of nowhere, wearing loafers, slacks, a blouse, and a blazer.
Wow.
It made no
And
sense. I mean,
yeah, and this is the one of the chapters in the book, The Mysterious Businesswoman of the Forest.
yes, sir. Yeah, that's exactly it. And so there's it. That's what we called her, the businesswoman of the forest. Like businesswoman roam through remote forest all the time. That's certainly happens in your neck of the woods. No, absolutely not. It was very odd. And this woman seemed very off, almost as though she was intoxicated. Her mannerisms were off. Her social interactions were off. And she wanted our team to drop what we were doing and follow her to a remote county road. And she said at the end of this county road was an old structure like a barn that was encountered by creatures that she called, and I quote, monkey bears, end quote.
Wow.
Now, I don't know what that means, but she wanted us to stop what we were doing and go to this locale with her in the middle of the night and trust her to see these monkey bears. Well, I don't think it would take anybody, more than a second or two of a thought to think that that's not a wise thing to do.
No, no.
So I started, just trying to get her to go away. I just needed her to go away so we could continue with our after action review and our debrief. And she started making small talk, and she, asked, what university did I go to, or and it turns out that she claims that she went to the same university I did. Okay, remarkable coincidence. And I said, well, okay, that's interesting. What did you study there? And she goes, oh, well, I studied psychology.
Wow.
I said, okay, that's odd.
She was getting into your head.
Getting into my head, I said, well, and thinking that I would catch her up, I said, what were some of the professors you studied under? And she started naming professors that I had studied under. So, here you have a businesswoman driving around in the forest in the middle of the night that happens to come visit us, in her, rather, dashing loafers and, blazer, that happens to go to the same university I did, studied the same program, and knows the same professors.
Hmm. Were you getting a little bit, not going to use the word frightened, but were you starting to worry a little by then?
Oh, yeah, I was weirded out. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. This was just so bizarre. And to make things even stranger, uh, I was talking about not understanding human cueing, or not, not understanding how people socially interact. During the middle of this transaction, with our group, she moves out maybe 20 yards, 30 yards from our area, still within the light of our lanterns, and she squats down and urinates in front of us,
Wow.
which it was so bizarre and so improper that we were speechless. And this woman had a male that appeared to be about 15 or 16 with her, that she claimed was her son. And I say son, I put it in quotation marks because I don't know what their biological relation was. But this 15-year-old boy sat there very stoically, saying very few words during this entire transaction. So eventually we were able to get her to go away, and we did our after action review, uh, which is about a 40-minute video, and I have a transcript of that video in the book so people can read along exactly what we said while we were discussing it. And after that incident and that experience, I started doing a little research. Like I said, I'm primarily was a paranormal researcher. I'm
Yep.
not a ufologist or anything like that. So I
Yep.
started looking into the Men in Black phenomena, and some of the things that started showing up is visitors that come to people after they have experienced something unusual, the timing,
Hmm.
that are improperly dressed for the occasion. They're either dressed too formally, or something about their clothes doesn't seem quite right,
Hmm.
almost like they don't understand what you wear in that particular type of situation. They miss social cueing. They don't understand how humans communicate non-verbally, and they don't understand the niceties and the protocols of various societies, i.e., you don't squat down in front of other people and
No.
urinate.
No.
That's considered rather boorish. So I started putting all this together, and I'm like, well, what am I dealing with here? Well, it so happens that my base camp operator had gotten her name, and we did a little research, and we found a person that matches her description, that is a professional person, is in a licensed profession,
Hmm.
that her activities of that night, if it was indeed her, might result in her losing her license and thus her career.
Wow.
So I was faced with two options, two possibilities. Number one is I encountered this licensed professional on absolutely the worst night of her life, or B, this was someone mimicking this person, mimicking a real person.
I think it was a doppelganger moment.
Could have been. And I've had people ask me, well, why didn't you go to this person and ask them, the actual real person? And here's what I thought that would look like. If I go to this person who, say, option number one was having the absolute worst night of her entire life that might result in her losing her profession, she would deny it.
Hmm.
No, that wasn't me. Okay. If it was a doppelganger, I would go to this person, and their answer would once again be that wasn't me. So that there was no return on my investment in tracking this person down,
Right.
and either
Right.
embarrassing them or accusing them. So I just chalked it up as something very odd, and moved on.
One thing that interested me was her description of monkey bears, because I've interviewed several experiences in the past who have referenced the grey aliens with the large heads, and
Mhm.
as monkey something, and
Right, right.
that especially as children, and that description has been used, and I've heard it a lot now. So maybe there could have been an alien connection there.
There could be, and that dovetails into a event that we had. And let me look at my notes right here. It was rather recently, June 2020. Just last year. Less than a year ago. We once again went out to that area. We weren't able to camp in our usual location, so we ended up camping a few miles away. And during that time, we tried some of Stephen Greer's CE5 protocols.
Hmm.
And we went out to the meadow and ran the protocols, did the crop tones and all of that. The only thing that we really saw was an abnormally high number of what appear to be satellites, moving across the sky, about 50 of them, a whole bunch of them, but
Yep.
nothing else, and we were quite disappointed, well, dang it, we tried this wonderful protocol and nothing happened. So we went back to camp and, we all turned in. And the next morning, I was approached by one of my team members. Now, this team member, to give you a little bit of his background, he's a U.S. Air Force Academy graduate, has a degree in engineering, and for many years had a background in U.S. Air Force Special Operations. A very sober, solid, down-to-earth, business-like person.
Yep.
And he came to me and he said, Trey, I need to tell you something that happened. He said, I woke up at about 4:30 a.m. and I sprung awake and I had two words that were in my mind. And those words were Max or Knox, N-O-X, Magby. And those spell those phonetically are N-O-X, M-A-G-B-E-E, Knox Magby. And he said, once again, I woke up at 6:30. Same two words just, etched into my consciousness, Knox Magby.
Hmm.
So I wrote the words down and decided that I would do a little research later on in the week. Well, I started digging around and I found out that the word Nox refers to the Roman goddess of the night, N-O-X.
Mm-hmm.
Magby turned out to be a little bit more elusive, and I found a word Magba in Old English, which means kindred or children. Now, it stands to reason that once the Romans left Britain, and Old English was, started becoming, the prominent language, that the speakers of Old English would have knowledge of the recently departed Roman and their customs and religions. So
Yep.
so the term Nox and Magba could be contemporaneous. So you put those together and you have children or kindred of the night goddess. Now, what has been known to come to people at night into their bedrooms that are small like children?
Yep.
I'm thinking about the cover of like Whitley Strieber's Communion, the Greys.
Yeah, the Greys.
So, is that just a remarkable coincidence that these two words happen to be etched into my team members' minds after we did the CE5 protocol? Who knows?
Could he remember being somewhere else during the night? Did he get a visit and was taken somewhere else, but he just can't remember?
No, they just can't remember. That's something that I would like to do with some of my team members, and it's always time and funding, like a lot of things, is to have some hypnotic regression with some of these folks. If we go back, and I go back to the incident where we had the boxes and the strange visitor and all of that, right after that, I have a team member that started having nightmares and dreams about people coming into her bedroom at night and standing over her while she slept. So, who knows what what that could yield if we actually did some hypnotic regression with some of my team members.
Is there a lot of UFO activity in that area?
Yes, yeah, there is quite a bit. I mean, you can go back and look at this area, go back in some MUFON reports and other reports, and they've had we've seen them. Back in 2016, one of my team members, while we were out researching another area, the Blackwater Nature Preserve, one rainy night while we were gone and he was minding base camp, saw the moon come up and was very excited because, hey, the full moon is up. That means the clouds are breaking, the rain's going to break. We're not going to have to sit out here on a cold, wet weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then the moon started moving sideways.
Wow.
Well, I don't know about everywhere else, but where this area is, the moon just doesn't move sideways. And it stopped. And a very small, dark dot appeared in the middle of this luminous orb. And this dot started getting larger and larger, almost like the iris of a camera lens, until it eventually just about blotted out this orb, and all you had was like a luminous circle, like a ring of diamonds effect during an eclipse.
Yep.
And then it completely winked out. So we've had our own UFO experiences here. Last weekend, I have video of, could be a UAP or a series of UAPs at this location. I still have to analyze the video. So yeah, there's not only an experiential history of ourselves with UAPs, but a history going back with others.
Yeah. Skinwalker and Stardust, we associate portals with those two properties. Is there
Mhm.
a portal here?
Well, I would have to say, looking at my team approaching a box or some sort of anomaly and their heat signatures disappearing from our FLIR units, they were somewhere else, or at least partially. So, there's probably a good opportunity that there may be some sort of interdimensional doorway or pathway or whatever.
Yeah. Uh, do you think that's where these entities come through?
That's a good question. There's a lot of theories on that. Some, of course, people always throw out the extraterrestrial hypothesis. These are entities or beings from another planet. I kind of like the way that John Keel looked at it, as all of these happenings, be they UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, poltergeists, whatever, all somehow connected. And he used the term ultra terrestrials. That was his term.
Wow. Yeah.
The term I like to use is paradimensionals. Is, if we start looking into physics, it's pretty much been proven that there are multiple dimensions. Now, whether or not there are intelligent entities in these other dimensions, who knows? But there are other dimensions. And what if these dimensions, as they exist as either brains or strings, depending on which theory you use, what if these realities brush up against each other?
Hmm.
And there's just like a little tiny pinprick where
Yeah.
stuff can get across. And so take that further. What if these small portals, if you will, or wormholes, or whatever you want to call them, are either natural and these entities are using some sort of artificial means to hold these doorways open, or if they have a means to create these things artificially. So, one of the things that we're doing is trying to determine if there's any kind of phenomenology that we can detect in this area, be it electromagnetic fields, radiation, heat, to try to find some sort of causality with some of these strange phenomena that we've been encountering.
Yeah.
And if we can determine what that is, maybe we can predict it.
Okay. You dedicate a chapter in the book to time fluidity. What do you mean by that?
Time fluidity. Time seems to move differently here. And if we're doing, if time moves differently here, maybe we can somehow not only experience this, but we can, like I said, predict it. We had one instance where one of our team members was hiking along a trail, and he was going to once again run the ridge on top of the meadow, and he was by himself. We had a couple teams in the meadow, and he reached a well-known landmark and doesn't remember how he got there. He had missing time, and we were obviously concerned about him, and we're checking on his well-being, and being a somewhat obstinate A-type personality like the rest of us said, I'm fine, let me continue on with what I'm doing. So he continued his hike along the ridge, dropped back down in the meadow, and was approaching another team. Now, this other team consisted of a former U.S. Army Ranger that had a degree in physics from Georgia Tech, Georgia Institute of Technology.
Hmm.
Very down to earth guy. His research partner also had a degree from Georgia Tech, had an additional master's degree, and is a paramedic. So these are two very respectable observers and experiencers. So they're watching this one individual, Bob, as he, the one with the missing time, traverse the meadow, and they're watching him on their FLIR. And they see his man-shaped heat signature turn into an orb or ball or sphere,
Wow.
whatever you call it, and move at a high rate of speed across several hundred meters. Now, we calculated that speed to be about 25 miles an hour, and then once again turn into a man-shaped uh, heat signature. Now, once again, we were concerned with this individual's health. They quickly approached him, asked him how he was feeling, and he's like, "I'm perfectly fine. Why are you asking?" He said, "We saw you turn into this orb or whatever, move at an incredible speed, and then turned back into man form. And he goes, I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow.
All I did is I was walking along,
Yep.
like, I would normally walk along. So who had the distorted reality? Was it the man who turned into the orb, or was it the observers?
Yeah.
Time runs differently here. Things run differently here.
Wow. Another chapter that fascinated me was the unknown path. What do you mean by that?
The unknown path. Unfortunately, the unknown path refers to one of our members who suddenly passed away. And the unknown path talks about how his death affected us and called into question, should we continue this project? He was an absolute integral and key member of the anomalous studies and observation group. And the unknown path refers to him taking that unknown path, after death that we can't follow. And he's,
Yep.
one of the gentlemen that the book is dedicated to. And that was a hard chapter to write because he passed away just as recently as July.
Right.
And it was one of those sad moments, but it was also a rather defining moment. Should we continue on? Do we have the heart to continue on? And as a group, we decided that this quest, A, is too important for us to abandon, and B, it's not what he would want. Uh, Another supporter of the project died as recently as February, which was my father. So it's unfortunately this situation and this project has had losses. And
Okay.
how do we deal with these losses? And does it cause us to collapse and throw away everything we've done so far, or does it give us a certain degree of fortitude to carry on?
Right. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear about those losses. Um, a lot of experiences that come in contact with other entities always walk away with some type of message. Other than the businesswoman in the forest, have you had any messages at all from these entities?
Well, we did a series of experiments using the Estes protocol, which I don't know if you're familiar with.
No.
What the Estes protocol is, and let me back up. Everybody has seen the ghost shows on TV where they use what they call a ghost box. It's a device that hops around FM frequencies,
Yep.
and every once in a while you can pick up some sort of intelligible word. Okay, a lot of questions about that, because is the person, do you hear words based on your own perceptions and your own desires? But what the Estes protocol does is takes that one step further. Is you take a ghost box and you run the output through a series of earbuds, sound canceling earbuds. You take an individual, they put the earbuds in, then they put a series of shooting muffs over their ears, so they can't hear anything other than what's coming out of that box.
Right.
You take that individual and now you blindfold them, so they can't see and they can't hear of anything going on outside of their little experience. You tell them if they hear any intelligible word, they are to repeat it. It doesn't matter, if they hear kumquat, they just say kumquat,
Okay.
whatever. You have a questioner or interviewer that's asking questions. And we decided to try this in the meadow with some amazing results. And some of the what we got out of this Estes session is the entity that we believe that we were able to communicate with doesn't necessarily wish us harm, but it's just a little irritated, that we're there perhaps impacting or disrupting their work.
Yeah.
And when I started asking about different types of phenomenology, like I discussed earlier, electromagnetism and gravity and radiation and all of that, it became kind of agitated. I don't think it wishes us ill. The analogy I use is one of two workmen working on a sidewalk, in a neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
They poured the concrete, they're smoothing it out, and the little Dennis the Menace type child comes up and is standing at the edge of where these workmen are, finishing up their labors, and it's just chatting at him, just gabbing at him, blah 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 blah. The workmen don't hate the child, and they don't wish the child ill, but they just wish the child would go away and let them do what they're trying to do.
Okay.
If on a good day they might stop and interact with the child a little bit and, have maybe some sort of two-way discourse. Other days they might seem a bit hostile and cross with the child, just wishing them to go away. In other days, they might be completely apathetic and just ignore the child. I think we've stumbled across some workmen building their allegorical sidewalk, and we're the little chatty child
Hmm.
trying to stick our noses right in the middle of it.
That's interesting. Yeah. Other than moments like that, have you ever felt in danger at any time?
No, not actually physical danger. We've been, like I said, weirded out a little bit. This stuff is kind of odd and a bit unnerving, but no, never, never actually feeling like we were in danger. These are My team is a pretty solid group of people, down to earth, and many of them that have military, medical, or law enforcement backgrounds have been in some pretty dicey situations. So they're not not folks that get rattled easily.
Okay. Last question. Do you have an answer of what this all means?
Yes, 42. No, that's what Douglas Adams says was the answer to life, the universe, and everything. No, I don't. I really don't. I'm going to use another analogy, and I apologize if I do too many analogies, but it makes sense to me. If you have a ant mound in a forest, and the road department decides to build a freeway through this forest, and they build their freeway and they put the tar and down the asphalt and they get it done. And one day these ants are out going about their daily ant business, and they run across the edge of this freeway and they climb up on top of it and looking at this expanse of blacktop. How do they comprehend that? That is so far outside of their understanding of the universe. They don't even know what a freeway is. How do they interact with it?
Yep.
Do they try to bite it? Do they try to talk to it? Do they take samples of it? And will they ever, in their little ant minds, understand the concept of a freeway? Well, we're those ants, and we're stumbling across something absolutely phenomenal.
Hmm. Makes a
Now,
lot of sense.
yeah, now maybe one day we can conceptualize this freeway and understand it, or we might be the little ant standing on the edge of a piece of blacktop trying to talk to it. So,
Yep. Yep.
do we ever get the answer? I don't know. I hope so. What I would like to see is if we don't come up with an answer, i.e., my group or others like us, that maybe in the future, groups can take some of our research and our data, and they can use it to build the answer for maybe a future generation.
Okay. The Meadow Project. So the book is out. I noticed that March 1st was used as a release date, but this book has been out for a few months now.
Yeah, it's been out a few weeks. We once it started really we started getting a lot of interest in it. My publisher decided to go ahead and do a early release. So yes, it's on Amazon in both hard copy and Kindle form right now.
Okay. And do you plan to do a follow up to it?
Well, it depends on what the future brings. If more material and amazing experiences are significant enough to write another book, yeah, absolutely. Because, like I said, it's not my story; it's the
Hmm.
world story, and it deserves to be told.
Sure does. Trey, thanks very much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Trey Hudson joining us today.